that your listeners, we present to you the full version of the story that you enjoyed. The morning began as usual. While I was shaving, Diana had time to make coffee and toast. She told me about the difficult fate of her friend Ina, who'd been abandoned by another husband. I've already lost count which one. She also told me that she would be late today because after work she would go to her mother as she was sick again. I listened to her half-heartedly, concentrating on my own problems. I had a busy day today with 2 very important meetings with clients, which could dramatically change my business for the better. Yora, aren't you listening to me? Diana tapped her spoon on her coffee cup, wanting to get my attention. Of course I am, honey. I'm sick, and you're going to be late tonight. I strained my facial muscles and forced out a sour smile. I'm telling you, I might end up spending the night at my mom's. Diana tried to make a mournful face. I've been worried about her health lately, but you've never been worried about my mom's problems. She added and looked at me defiantly. But you bet I didn't. My wife's mother was a challenge. But for all 11 years of living together with Diana, I tried to stay away from my mother-in-law. Communicating with my mother-in-law was justified only in one case, when it was necessary to use her saliva instead of snake venom to treat sciatica. Thank goodness she didn't want to get involved in our family either, reducing all contacts mostly to communication with her daughter and grandchildren. So anyway, did you get it? Diana was stirring her coffee with the spoon. Got it! To pick up the kids and feed them dinner without waiting for you. I got up and wiped my lips with a napkin. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Ups, say hi to your mom for me. I kissed my wife on the cheek, said goodbye to the kids, and took my briefcase and left the apartment. To tell you the truth, I recently began to stress the chronically painful state of my mother-in-law. She was only 52 and her health was quite poor. I did not go into detail, but my wife spent more and more nights at her mother, explaining that she was constantly sick. True, Diana did not specify what, and I was not really interested. So this time I did not pay much attention to what my wife said. If she needs something, she can call me back. I worked in a small firm selling antiques. Actually, as concrete, along with our core business, we were engaged in the evaluation and examination of jewelry, mostly antiques too. To be completely honest, this firm was mine. Apart from me, there were 7 other employees, including my secretary and 3 salesmen in a small antique store on the first floor of the building I rented. Today I was, in fact, to meet 2 very important meetings with clients, which could dramatically change my business for the better. The outcome of these meetings could have a significant impact on my income, both negative and positive. The largest bank in our city was going to invest in a contemporary art gallery. They needed expert advice. It was a long-term project, and I was very interested in signing a cooperation agreement to advise them. The second meeting was no less important. Less than a month ago, a famous collector of antiques died, and his heir, to put it mildly, did not share the passion of his relative, was going to sell the collection. But before he wanted to understand its real value, since he himself has no idea in antiques, he contacted me and asked to assess its legacy with a possible subsequent redemption. The price of the issue was a few $100,000, so everything was in my hands. Besides, in the morning, I received a call from the editor of the publishing house, which was to publish my first monograph on stamps on jewelry. The ability to understand this issue is one of the fundamentals of antiquarian business. My work in this field allowed me to generalize available public information and add my personal experience to write a book which could help specialists and collectors to find their way in the world. Box of jewelry marks. It was a tedious and laborious job, but it was well worth it. Writing a book like this gave me and my company a certain reputation in narrow circles of specialists and collectors of antiques. And this is worth a lot in the literal and figurative senses. I plunged myself into the business. I did not notice how the day flew by. Everything went more than well. I concluded the contract. The consultation went well, and the heirs decided to sell the entire collection to my company. The publishing house gave me a pilot copy of the monograph for author's revision, assuring me that the book would be published in a month. After picking up the children at school, I headed home. While I was busy with dinner, Diana called me several times, wondering how we were doing. She stayed at her mother's house because her mother's blood pressure was high and she was afraid she would have to call an ambulance. Finally, everyone ate and settled down. I poured myself some brandy and sat down to edit my book. Gradually, tired took its toll and I fell asleep at the table. Diana arrived in the morning and immediately ran to the shower. Through the noise of the water, she was babbling to me about her mother and the fate of another feminist friend. I brewed coffee, made an omelette, and waited for the kids to eat breakfast so I could send them off to school. Today I decided to stay late and drive to work by 10 o'clock. Late work did the trick. I had a terrible headache. Diana didn't stay long. After finishing her monologue and finishing her coffee, she rushed off to work, saying she would be on time today. Diana, a gorgeous, long-legged, green-eyed blonde. Actually, to divine face, I look more modest. A tall, blue-eyed, brown-haired man with a landmine scar on his left cheek and already graying temples. Acts memories of military service. We are 34 years old and we have been together for 11 years. We have 2 children, Pavel and Kostya, boys 10 and 8. What I do, you already know. Diana works in a beauty salon. Manicure, pedicure, haircuts. She really likes her job, although she has a higher education. She graduated from the University of Technology. She graduated and graduated, but she never worked a day. Still, immediately after university, she went to a hairdressing course, and a friend got her a job in a salon. A lot of clients and customers. Useful connections. You know what I mean. I'm not jealous by nature, and my wife didn't give me any reason to be jealous. And although we live in a big city, sooner or later everything comes out. But as they say, Caesar's wife is above suspicion. If there had been anything, I would have known. What an arrogant idiot I was. Now I realize that adultery is in the very nature of women, that in the pursuit of new sensual sensations, she will stop at nothing. Most women's lives are dominated by emotions and passions. Thrown into this maelstrom of love, they forget everything. It's their husbands, their children, their conscience. Everything is a chimera. There's only me. Financially, our family was well provided for. Diana could not work, but she didn't want to sit at home, and right after her maternity leave, she went to work. Once a year, the children and I went to the seaside. In terms of intimacy, we were fine too. It seemed to me that my woman was satisfied with this sweet side of family life. Always and everywhere. That was my motto in this area. At least there were no complaints from my wife about it. I was brave enough to go along with any of my wife's experiments and suggestions. All this was until recently. But then 6 months ago, her mother got sick. Diane threw everything she had into helping her. Frequent nightly vigils at the bedside of the suffering mother-in-law had a negative effect on our family relationships. No, outwardly everything was the same. Like my wife's soft, affectionately weary sadness at my refusal of intimacy. Well, I'm so exhausted at work and at Mom's. Wait, my love, not now. And a soft, affectionate touch on my cheek. That not now became the motto of our married life. Everything not now, from sex to vacations. And her mother continued to be sick, my wife visiting her more and more often. The day didn't get off to a good start in the morning. When I got to work, I remembered that I had left the bathroom light on. Not God knows what kind of problem, but still decided to call home to my wife and ask her to check. But there was no answer on either the home phone or the cell phone. I was about to go home when I was connected to a customer. Yuri, my dear, it's Seth who's bothering you. Could you please come up to me and look at one thing? I've been offered a platinum ring from the middle of the 19th century, but I have doubts about its authenticity. I'll pay you well for consultation. The man who spoke had the enchanting, enveloping baritone that makes our gender partners swoon. Seth, that name sounds familiar. The patron of the arts, at home in summer and in Spain in winter. Was owner of several newspapers and a share in the oil business. Probably decided to invest his money in antiques. Well, if you've got the money, then we're coming to you. All right. I can be there at 6 p.m. Text me your address. Great. Then I'll invite the salesman by that time too. I won't say goodbye. Mezentsev hung up. I dialed my wife's number again. No trick. No use. Maybe she is sound asleep or has gone to her mother again. Mezentsevi's house was in an elite cottage community, 30 kilometers from the city. His mansion reeked of big money. A mile away, walking along the path, paved with tiles, I pushed the heavy front door. The owner, 45 years old, in a home robe thrown over his bare body through the lapels of which I could see the gray hair on his chest, met me at the threshold. His whole appearance indicated that he was due in does me a great favor by breathing the same air as me. Please. Yuri, he pulled a welcoming smile over his face with some difficulty. Let's go to the second floor to my office. We climbed up marble stairs and found ourselves in a hall with several doors. The behind one was an office, the others seemed to be bedrooms. We did not have time to exchange even a couple of duty phrases as the phone rang. Mikhail. Yes, I'm home. He covered the tube with his hand and nodded to me. I'll meet you now. You'll have to bore me for a while. Yuri, the landlord, turned to me. I'll come down and meet the salesman. Please, Cognac Whiskey. Help yourself. Without closing the door, Mezentsev began to go down the stairs. I called my wife again. Where has she disappeared to? I was beginning to get nervous. There were long ringing tones, and suddenly a familiar tune began to play. I did not realize at first that it was my wife's phone answering. The sound came from behind the nearest door. I went out into the hall and carefully opened the door to the bedroom. In the middle was an unmade large bed under a blue silk canopy. A playing phone with a glowing screen lay on the side of the bedside mat. It must have fallen by accident, but for a few seconds, I stood there stunned, not knowing what to think or do. My heart pounded in my throat, occasionally falling into my stomach. I leaned over and picked up my phone. Up on the burning screen, I saw my face and the signature. Beloved. There was no doubt it was Diane's phone. I hung up and put the phone in my pocket. I looked up and looked at the bed. Thus from under the pillow sticking out thin straps of a pink bright. I carefully pulled on one, and in my hands was my wife's open work. The lacy bra, the one from the set I had bought with Diana a month ago. I slipped it into the inside pocket of my jacket and quickly returned to my office. A few minutes later, the owner came in, accompanied by a scrawny, dull-looking man. How do you do, gentlemen? Mikhail. Yuri. He introduced us to each other. The guest did not hesitate to take out an antique Morocco case and handed it to me. Just to avoid trembling hands, I opened the lid carefully and saw a magnificent antique platinum ring with a ruby. I possessed it for some minutes under a magnifying glass, and then I held it up to the lamp to study the markings upon the ring and the play of light in the blood-red stone. There was no doubt this is indeed an antique ring of the middle of the 19th century, the work of an unknown goldsmith. I wrote an opinion, gave it to Mezentsev, got my fee and quickly left. I couldn't bear to be in that house. I wondered if Mezentsev knew that I was the husband of his mistress. But my Diana was his mistress, I no longer doubted. God, what an effort it cost me ostensible calm. How I wanted to punch that face. Fortunately, the army's skill is not yet forgotten. I sat in the car for a long time and could not move. So that's whose bed Diana had spent her evenings and nights at for the last 6 months. And her mother-in-law had diligently covered up her daughter's infidelity. Our whole lives flashed before my eyes. For a moment I was filled with despair. Why did she do this to me? Why? If I could, I would howl. I had to try to pull myself together. Where to go? All right, I'm going home to close this thing. I turned right and drove off. After a while, I pulled onto the highway and headed toward the haunting, twinkling lights of the big city. I have no luck with women. Sooner or later they leave me. When I was a child, my mother left me, running off to her lover. Apparently, there was no place in her happy future for me. And now here's a wife. After 11 years of marriage, it seems she has decided to make a drastic change in her life. But to start with a clean slate, so to speak. What is it about me that makes women not stay near me for a long time? I met my mother 20 years after her escape into a new life. I can't deny that the meeting made a strong impression on me. I tried my best not to cry like a little boy. You see, 20 years of separation could not make me forget her voice, the smell of her hair, the warmth of her hands. I didn't understand how she was able to abandon her 5-year-old child and not once during that time remember him. Had I forgiven her? To be honest, I didn't know myself. One thing was clear to me. I still loved her, just as I had 20 years before. There was nothing I could do about it. My father, after my mother left, never married again. He loved me and was very much afraid that my stepmother would not be able to replace my mother. That woman wants another man's children. And anyway, a woman doesn't owe anyone anything. It is a man's responsibility to raise and support other people's children. The rule for cuckolds and henchmen is, the father is not the one who conceived, but the one who raised him. But that doesn't apply to a woman. That's how we lived, 2 men abandoned by the woman we once loved. And then Dad died and I moved in with my grandparents. An orphan with a living mother. Ex-women often reproach men for being too cruel. Nonsense. But a woman will stop at nothing on her way to personal happiness. She will sweep away everything on her way. Oh, including their own children. The men outnumber men in cruelty and guile. Diana? What was she missing? Love. Tenderness, money. Love, tenderness, money, adrenaline. In all 11 years, I never once looked at another woman. Did she take my love as a weakness, assured herself that I wasn't going anywhere from her? Maybe Diana never loved me. It doesn't seem so. But for all these years we lived soul to soul, I would have sensed falsity. I'd feel it in my heart. Until today, I never saw any sign of my wife's infidelity. Everything was as smooth as ever. This was the circumstance that tore at my heart the most. Stupid jerk. Diana had been cheating for almost 6 months, selflessly sleeping in someone else's bed, pretending that everything was fine with us. Watching morning monologues, taking care of the kids, taking care of me. And everything in the end was a lie. I was reminded of the words of an emancipated lady I know, husband, that's a potential enemy. Do they really think that? And behave accordingly, like in bed with the enemy? The outcome for me was clear. I found myself feeling uncomfortable with Diana, even squeamish. Cheating woman is like an ashtray. One poor thing. I was somehow too calm in the face of what had happened. Maybe later I finally got all the horror of what happened. In the meantime, I was in a kind of stupor. It was as if it wasn't happening to me, and I was just watching from the sidelines. When I got home, Diana wasn't there yet. That's weird. She promised to be home early today. The successity 24 minute. In the morning, she said her mother-in-law would pick up the kids from school, and we'd have a party for two. It made me shudder to think about it. That it looked like we weren't going to have languorous evenings for the foreseeable future. I went into the kitchen and took a bottle of cognac out of the cabinet and put it on the table. But I was in no hurry to drink. I decided to explain myself to my wife sober. Diana arrived almost at 11 o'clock in the evening. I'm sorry. Aki, as always, has problems with her husband. I had to go and console her. I wanted to call her, but I lost my phone somewhere. I must have left it at my mother's. Diana spoke as usual, taking off her coat and boots in the hallway. Have you had dinner? I'll make something. She went into the kitchen and put a bag of groceries on the stool. Oh, cognac. Will you pour me one? I've been so exhausted all day, it's unbelievable. You bet. Not every man can stand it. It's such a strain, work, kids, husband, lover. I looked at Diana in silence. I wondered how she would get out of this situation. Would she admit adultery or play dumb to the end? I'm going to take a shower. And you peel the potatoes. My wife almost ran to the bathroom. It was clear that she had not been to Vicky's house today. It's strange that her lover didn't have a bathroom and Diana had to go without a bath. Is it a fetish or something? But or is sins better washed away at home? Diana was saying something, but the noise of the water muffled her words. I didn't care what she said anymore. All that mattered was what I had to say. My wife came into the kitchen in a naked robe and a towel over her head. So, did you peel the potatoes? She turned on the stove and took out a frying pan. Now we're going to fry and make eggs. Don't just sit there, cut the bread and sausage. Diana was in the kitchen as if nothing had happened. I even thought for a moment that nothing had happened. It was just an ordinary evening out of 1,000. But only for a moment. Diana, leave the frying pan alone. Sit down, we have to talk. I tried my best to control myself. Have you noticed that conversations about cheating always start the same way? We need to talk. It doesn't matter who initiated it, husband or wife. What matters is that it's time to explain yourself. Diana looked at me in surprise, but left the frying pan alone. Can we eat first? She said uncertainly, and then looked away. I realized that she guessed the subject of the conversation and tries to stall for time. Later, if you have an appetite. I was adamant. Diana, are you seeing someone? What do you mean? My wife made a surprised face. That's right, you're being silly. I mean a lover. You have a lover. How long have you been cheating on me? I tried my best not to burst into tears. A year, 6 months, a month? Yura, what nonsense. What lover? Who's cheating? My God, what are you talking about? My wife's indignation seemed to have no limit. She was an outraged innocence herself. All done, she's got a good grip, not a muscle in her face. Diana, don't be ridiculous. I know everything. How much, with whom, and even where. By the way, did you find a phone? Maybe we should call Mama. My wife was silent, gathering her thoughts. It is very bad to be so absent-minded. It is necessary to check whether something is not forgotten. I put her phone on the kitchen table. I saw Diane's pupils dilate, and she put her hand over her mouth. Where did you get it? She barely whispered. I found it in Maisence's bedroom. I wonder what you call him. Bunny. Pupsick, Nicholas. I openly mocked her. You've got it all wrong. Yes, I was at his house, but it was for work. I was giving him a manicure. Diana was ready to burst into tears. She didn't even ask which Nikolai. She must have known who it was. In the bedroom, in his bed. I admit it. And with her tits, she massaged. What tits? What are you talking about? Diane was already screaming. She must have recovered from the surprise. I silently put the bray on the table. The pink one with the lace ones. Tatiana was silent, feverishly thinking of an excuse. I was hot, so I changed into a robe and took off my bra at the same time. You know how the breasts sweat, especially in a bray. You meant to understand that. So there was also a striptease. I was laughing outright. Although I wasn't laughing at all. Ayana shuddered, as if from the blow, apparently realized that the excuse did not work. Yura, I love only you. I do not need anyone. I don't know what you've been up to, but I'm telling the truth. We have 2 children. Diana fell on her knees in front of me, sobbing in her voice. She grabbed my palm and began to kiss it. The tears streamed down her cheeks. There was so much love and tenderness in her voice that it was impossible not to forgive her. I wanted to hug Diana, kiss her, stroke her hair, and calm her. She was just at work. Yes, I would have forgiven her if it were not for the familiar antique platinum ring with a blood-red ruby instead of a wedding ring on the ring finger of her right hand. Diana finally stopped talking and looked at me silently. I took her right hand. Where did you get that ring? She looked at me, perplexed. It was a friend's. I took it to try it on and wear it, to see if it suited me, she said. Okay, that's enough. I think you'd better go now. Besides, you've got somewhere to go. I'll file for divorce myself. We'll decide about the kids tomorrow. I got up. It was time to get this show over with. My wife somehow immediately sank down and went silently to get dressed. Several times she tried to speak to me, but I kept silent. At the door, she turned to me. Yuri, don't drive me away. But don't make a mistake you can't undo later. I love you. I silently closed the door behind her. When you love, no one is needed. The one at all, the one. And if there is anyone else but the one you love, that's it. Honeys, we're together. It's over. I don't want to live, and I'm too lazy to shoot myself. I returned to the kitchen, poured myself a brandy, and sat opposite the window. It's the same courtyard, the lantern with no bright yellow rattling light, and all around darkness, in the street and in the soul. My heart ached terribly. It sucked unbearable pain, spread throughout my body, penetrating to my fingers. A month passed. Diana and I lived on parallel planes. She and the children were at her mother's. Her lover had gone to winter in Spain without her. Asked what she was doing, who she was living with. I wasn't interested. We were given 2 months to reconcile, and I was waiting for the deadline to put a final end to my family life. It's during this time, I avoided meeting girls and women in every possible way. After parting with Diana, I immediately became an enviable fiancé. How could I? Do not look for women. Make money and women will find you. My book came out. I was invited to London for its presentation. These new useful acquaintances and connections in the antique world. The circulation of the book sold out quickly, and the publisher was preparing a second edition. Accordingly, I received a decent fee. And that, the bachelor life has its advantages. Do what you want, with whomever you want. No report, only sometimes in the evenings. I felt such a longing that I wanted to howl. Love, like a tooth, can't be taken out, except with the heart. I went out with the boys on weekends. My mother-in-law brought them to me. Diana didn't want to disturb me unnecessarily. I didn't have any special conversations with my mother-in-law, but I could see that she was very worried about her daughter. It was strange. It seemed to me that she thought our marriage was a mistake, and to put it mildly, does not like me. In the evening, I would bring the kids to my mother-in-law's doorway, and they would make their own way to her apartment. Diana did not prevent my meetings with the children. I went to work with my head. Things were going well. We organized 2 exhibitions of paintings, conducted several consultations for private collectors. My company enjoyed steady authority, and I was eagerly sought out by amateurs and professionals. The apotheosis of my work was the invitation to the famous Christie's auction to conduct an examination of antique gold pendants. I sometimes stayed up late and even spent several nights in my office. Thankfully, I was tired. On another weekend, I decided to take a drive through some pretty remote places. So, without any purpose, just to go for a drive, to unwind, so to speak. I wanted to take the children, but then I changed my mind. It will be difficult for them to bear a long trip. I decided to explore these places in search of abandoned villages, to crawl through the abandoned houses. Sometimes you can pick up very interesting things there in terms of culture and price. Now it has become fashionable to collect and invest in antiques. You can sell everything, even things that yesterday no one needed. So I decided to combine business with pleasure, and dispel and if possible to earn money. I got ready quickly, and in 10 minutes I had already joined the morning stream of cars, which despite the day off was not getting any smaller. On the way out of the city, I stopped at a gas station and filled up the tank. Who knew how there was gasoline in the middle of nowhere? I went about 20 kilometers along the ring road, and in half an hour I reached the highway. After 160 kilometers, leaving the reserve on the left, I turned right. I had to slow down. It was freezing. Just a little snow had fallen during the night, and now it was flying in all directions in front of the car like waves. I drove about 30 kilometers, and the asphalt ended. I pulled off onto the dirt road, and soon I was surrounded by a dense forest. Turning around another turn, a small village suddenly appeared. According to the map, there was a medium-sized lake behind the village. I stopped outside the store. There were two men standing by the porch. Like all members of this species of biped, they were anxious to find firewater, and with some surprise, mixed with hope, stared at me. I was good. They were in camouflage, warm army boots with high ankle boots, and a tactical knife in a camouflage sheath on my belt. The sunglasses on my face and the deep scar on my left cheek gave me an extra brutal charisma, which the anxious men immediately imbued with. Man, lend me a couple of bucks. Instead of a polite hello, one of the men addressed me in a husky voice. Only a man with a stale soul and a heart of stone could ignore this request. I was not one of those men. I took a few bills from my purse and handed them to the sufferer. Are you from around here? Yes, stretching his vowels, answered the countryman of the first man. And what's next? I waved my hand in the direction of the road leading to the forest. Don't we know? The man scratched his head and added, we don't go there. I went back to the car. The clock on the dashboard showed 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I had to keep my eyes on the road. But it was heavily wooded on all sides, and the farther I drove, the narrower it got. Soon branches of bushes growing on the roadside were ramming against the sides of the car. I reached a fork in the road. Which way to turn? They say if you don't know the way, turn left. So I turned left. The autumn twilight was setting in, but I kept driving along the road with no end in sight. Soon it got really dark and I had to turn on my headlights. At another fork, I turned left again. It seemed to me that the forest was getting thinner. The headlights caught glimpses of some twisted houses in the darkness. It looked like a village. I glanced at the map. There were no settlements within 20 kilometers. That's where the hell had I gone? I was about to enter the village when suddenly the engine of my car started to hiss and then completely stopped. The radio was also silent. Though I turned off the light for fear of the battery dying, took a flashlight, buttoned my jacket, and got out of the car. It was darkness all around. I caught the vague outline of a structure in my side vision, but that of houses, not that of barns. There was silence. No dog barking, no human conversation, no other sounds peculiar to a live village in the evening. Not a single window was lit. I looked at my phone. There was no network. Who would have doubted it? All as ordered. I locked the car and walked down the weed-covered street, shining a flashlight under my feet. The village was small, about 10 or 15 houses, but somewhere to the side, a small river or stream was rumbling. When I had passed almost the whole village, I suddenly noticed a light in the outermost house. When I came closer, I saw in the surviving window the glow of a kerosene lamp burning somewhere inside the house. There was no fence around, so I walked right up to the door. It swung open suddenly, as if someone had been waiting for me. "Come in quickly." A husky voice came from the room. I closed the door behind me and made my way to the back of the house. There was an old table against the wall. On it was a kerosene lamp with a burning wick. In the dim light, I saw an old man sitting by the stove tossing some logs into the stove. At that moment, "Sit down. Don't just stand there." The old man nodded at an old chair across the stove. "Would you like some tea?" I nodded. The man came to the table and poured a thick hot tea from an aluminum kettle into a rickety porcelain cup with herbs. He handed me a full mug. "I am Joseph Petrikov. You can just call me Grandpa Petrak." I took a sip. Slightly sweet and sour drink pleasantly warmed my gullet and stomach. "I have some food in the car. Maybe I'll go." The old man used the poker to settle the firewood. I felt so comfortable, as if I had lived in this house half of my life. Just with every sip of tea, fatigue disappeared, anxiety disappeared. For everything around became familiar and familiar. "Are you warm now?" The old man sat down on the stool in front of me. "It's going to be absolutely cold soon. Winter is just around the corner. And the roads will be snowed in. I won't be able to pass." His husky voice lulled me to sleep, and at the same time brought a kind of quietness. Suddenly, I wanted to tell the unfamiliar person about my life, about my troubles, about the betrayal of my mother and wife. We sat for a long time. I talked, and he listened attentively. Sometimes he nodded, nodding meaningfully, or hummed, stroking his gray beard. I told him everything. It's about the war, about my father, about my mother, about my wife and children. When I finished, we were silent for a long time. Then he poured my tea again and was the first to sip from his mug. "Yes, you've been through a lot. Plus, all your life you have been chasing happiness, not realizing that it is there. Just hold out your hand. They loved you and they love you now. Plus, only you don't notice it. You're so wrapped up in your resentments, you hide in a hole like a badger. Only your nose sticks out." The old man took another sip from his mug. "Look around you and you will see your happiness. And be kinder to people, especially to those around you. Remember, a man's strength is not in his fists, but in forgiveness. Learn to forgive. And remember, if one door is closed, look for another and do not be afraid to open it." His words sounded like they were from far away. My eyes fell asleep, and I fell asleep unnoticed. I woke up to the sound of the radio. I was sitting in the car with my head leaning against the window. My back and legs were frozen, so it was just a dream. Grandpa Petrak, fragrant tea, a long, intimate conversation. I remembered every word the old man said to me. I could still taste his tea in my mouth. No way! But how did I end up in the car? I had no answer to that question. I turned the ignition key. The engine rumbled smoothly and peacefully. The car slowly trotted down the overgrown street. I looked around carefully, trying to find the house where I had spent the night talking to the old man. But along the street there were only dilapidated huts, blackened by time and the rains. Here I was at the edge of the street. The last house, the place seemed similar. There was no fence. I approached the hut. The porch had fallen through. The door was torn from its hinges. Of course, it was only a dream. Her tiredness, worries, and cares of the past days had done their work. I was about to leave when I suddenly noticed some yellowed cloth sticking out between the planks of planking. I tugged it carefully. It looked like a bundle. I unwrapped the cloth, and on the palm of my hand was an ancient ring, blackened with time, and a signet ring of unknown metal. It had an unknown monogram embossed, not engraved, on it. In ancient times, such rings were used to seal important letters or other messages with seals. An interesting find. Where did it come from? I put the ring in one of my jacket pockets. I shall think of that later. I put the gas pedal to the metal, and the car sped off down the frozen road. It was already quite light. It was around the bend, not far from the road. I saw an old abandoned cemetery. Crooked crosses, cracked stone tombstones. The typical village graveyard. I got out of the car. I did not go far into the depths, but walked around the edge. My attention was attracted by a grave that was a little away from the other graves. A metal pyramid topped with a star, once painted red. That the inscription on it was clearly visible. Petrikov Iosif, born in 1880. Executed by fascists on the 16th of November 1943. I drove up to my house when it was already absolutely dark. I was sitting in the car, trying to make sense of the events that had happened to me and to banish the weariness that had accumulated during the journey. Suddenly I remembered the ring. I looked at it for a long time, and then, without knowing why, put it on the ring finger of my right hand where my wedding ring used to be. It was like falling into a bottomless well. The morning began as usual. While I was shaving, Diana had time to make coffee and toast, to tell me about the back early, because my mother called and promised to stop by to visit. She would pick up the kids from school plate of my friend Inna, who was once again abandoned by her husband, and to tell me that today she would be herself. I listened to her half-heartedly, concentrating on my own problems. I had a busy day today. 2 very important meetings with clients that could dramatically change my business for the better. I spritzed some cologne on myself, adjusted the ring on my right hand, which was blackened with time, and went into the kitchen. Ira, aren't you listening to me? Diana tapped my coffee cup with the spoon, wishing to attract my attention. Of course I am, honey. Mom's coming to visit, and you're coming home early. Early from work today. I smiled at my wife. So I said, on the way home, buy a cake and champagne. Diane looked at me. Do you understand everything? I nodded. I went over to my wife, hugged her, and kissed her on the lips. Do you have the time? She grumbled, answering the kiss and looking into my eyes. She touched my cheek with her warm fingers. Dear listeners, your support is very important to us. If you like our story, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's very motivating for us. We need your feedback to improve our content.